We begin with a dramatic escalation in tensions between China and Taiwan and rising fears of a military confrontation. On Sunday, Taiwan celebrated its annual National Day with a show of might. There were aerial demonstrations and a parade featuring military hardware. That display of the island's defense capabilities capped off a very tense week. China flew a record number of fighter jets towards Taiwan's airspace, and China's president delivered a speech again demanding reunification. Taiwan and its allies, including the United States, call this a provocation. But China says it is Taiwan and the U.S. doing the provoking. Now, analysts are concerned that these rising tensions are shifting the status quo in the region. China views Taiwan as part of its territory, but Taiwan has been self-governed since 1949 and is vowing to stay that way. This is what Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen said on Sunday.
The people of Taiwan will never give in to pressure. We'll continue to bolster our defense and demonstrate our determination to defend ourselves to ensure that nobody can force Taiwan to take the path China has laid out for us.
And we can speak now to Wen Ti-sung, a lecturer at the Australian National University's College of Asia and the Pacific in the Taiwan Studies program, and he focuses on trilateral relations between the U.S., China, and Taiwan. He's joining us from Taipei today. Welcome to our show. I want to ask you about what we saw in the last week. We saw Taiwan putting on a show of military might during National Day celebrations over the weekend, but China has also been sending a record number of fighter jets close to Taiwan as well. Why are we seeing the situation escalate now?
I think the broader background issue is simply that the Taiwan issue is getting a lot more international attention lately, and it's something that China doesn't really want to see. We've been seeing countries like Australia, US, Japan, and others, as well as G7 really, increasingly becoming more vocal in terms of showing their concern for peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Beyond that, though, I would say that from the Chinese side, they are playing to both the external audience and the domestic audience. Taiwan, for example, Taiwan's opposition party, the KMT, has recently just had a new leadership election with the leader swearing into office on October 5th, just last week. So it's a period of time when the opposition in Taiwan is going through a soul-searching or rethinking of their China policy at this juncture. So it kind of makes sense for Beijing to be showing some muscles in the hope of shaping their preferences and nudge Taiwan's opposition and, by extension, Taiwan's ruling party's China policy directions in ways that Beijing like to see.
Well, I want to ask you about Taiwan's perspective here, because Taiwan is vowing to defend the island from China's pressure, but it doesn't want a military confrontation as well. So what does that actually look like? What does that mean for Taiwan?
I think Taiwan is trying to tell people that it will remain pragmatic in its relationship with China, and also that it will try as much as it can to uphold the status quo in cross-strait relations. So if we judge by President Tsai Ing-wen of Taiwan, her National Day speech recently, she mentioned the 4 commitments. It's kind of long and wordy, but the main ideas are that Taiwan will protect its freedom to rule itself, it will cherish its hard-earned democracy, and that it has no plan to unilaterally change the status quo, and any change, should it happen, will have to be decided democratically by the popular will of the Taiwanese people. So what does that all mean? I think in policy terms, it means that she will not initiate any major change on her own. Any change, should it come about, will have to come bottom up from the popular will of the Taiwanese electorate, i.e. Through the form of a referendum, for example. Now, if you know anything about Taiwan's electoral system, especially referendum, it's a very long and very high threshold process. That means that any change, however unlikely it is in the first place, any change will be slow, which means there will be enough time for prior notification and potentially negotiation with both the U.S. and China. So that's to say she'll be pragmatic and there'll be no surprises coming from her.
Okay, we'll talk about the U.S. Perspective in a moment, but first I want to ask you about China's view here, because China's leader, Xi Jinping, has also been speaking in public about Taiwan. So I'd like to play you some of his remarks from over the weekend at a speech marking the anniversary of China's 1911 revolution. Let's listen in.
The historic task of the complete reunification of the motherland must be fulfilled, and it will be fulfilled. Achieving national reunification by peaceful means best serves the interests of the nation as a whole, including our brethren in Taiwan.
Okay, so Xi Jinping vowing reunification, but by peaceful means. So how do you read what he said?
So the commitment to unification is part and parcel of the China dream, which has been Xi Jinping's defining governing narrative for so long. So there's no surprise there. There is also something about how he's going to punish pushers or promoters of Taiwan independence. Again, same as before. So what I'm going to look for is variation from what happened before. And I think what's interesting is that he tried to show a bit more moderation, as well as to try to bring back in strategic patience as the overarching thinking about Taiwan policy. So if you look at his speech, he talked about how peaceful unification remains the best way, remains in the best interest of the Chinese people. He also said another thing, which is that the Taiwan problem occurred because of weakness of China. And therefore, the Taiwan problem will also go away with the great revival of the Chinese nation. So that tells you that he thinks with growth in Chinese power, China will have a better chance to solve the Taiwan problem, so to speak, to use their language. So that means China can show some more patience and wait until terms become more favorable to China, rather than try to rush through the process using military escalation or even war.
Well, we have to talk about the U.S.'s role in all of this as well. You said Taiwan is getting a lot of international attention. The former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott says he doesn't believe the U.S. can sit by and watch China, quote, swallow up Taiwan. Do you think that's true?
I am cautiously optimistic about that. I think Taiwan is definitely very important to the United States and to the world as well, more generally speaking. And I think Taiwan is important for two reasons, both for its strategic interest as well as its position into the values discourse. By that, I mean strategically, Taiwan sits at the heart of the first island chain. That's a number of societies stretching from Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, all the way down to Australia. Taiwan is at the center of that. And along that area lies a lot of key U.S. allies as well. So if Taiwan were to fall into Chinese control, then U.S. major allies to the north, Japan and what have you, as well as U.S. allies to the south, countries like Australia, they'll be separated, and that will inflict a huge dent in the credibility of the U.S.-led alliance system in Asia. So that's a major problem. And of course, when it comes to values, Biden has been talking about multilateralism and how values-based diplomacy is at the center of that. Now, Taiwan is the foremost liberal democracy in the Chinese-speaking world. So if Taiwan were to fall into Chinese hands without U.S. doing anything, it's hard to imagine U.S. credibility ever to recover.
It is a sensitive situation indeed. Wen Ti-sung of the Australian National University's College of Asia and the Pacific, thank you for joining us. Well, Taiwan is trying to boost its defense capabilities amid the rising threat. DW spoke to students taking part in a high school military training program that's supposed to encourage young people to enlist once they graduate.
Bayonet training with wooden shotguns in school is part of Ye Yuqing's everyday school life. She's in the first batch of students doing a special military scheme at this private high school. She first joined the class because she thought the uniform was cool, but what she might face could be a war with China after graduation. Taiwan's defense minister said Beijing will have the capability to launch a full-scale invasion by 2025.
It's only 4 years away. I'm going to join the military. So I'm a bit scared because it seems like the war is so near. But we can only face it if we're in the force.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping has vowed to reunify Taiwan. Last week, Beijing sent a record number of military jets into Taiwan's air defense zone, the worst military tension in 4 decades. Taiwan's readiness for war is now a key issue. The self-governing island is facing a shortage of soldiers as it transitions towards an all-volunteer force. The Defense Ministry launched the Junior Reserve Officers Training Scheme with local high schools 3 years ago. This school now has 140 students in the program and is the only school that takes female students.
My parents were initially against my decision to train as a military officer because I must cut my hair short. They are conservative and think girls should look feminine. There's a stereotype that only men can be members of the military. But now is the era of gender equality. Women can defend our country too.
The girls train the same ways as the boys. To the surprise of teachers, they show more determination than the boys.
Our girls asked to do the same training as the boys. I'm very surprised and thrilled. As more and more girls join the program, they will become the next generation of our military. And they are the elites.
After 3 years of in-school training, serving in the military is no longer about the uniform. Ye Yucheng is hoping to get into the military college and join the Air Force after she graduates.
No one wants war. But as the cross-strait military tension worsens, defending our country isn't just a slogan anymore. We really have to act upon it. I want to defend Taiwan and my people because they are like my family.
These girls might soon be on the front line as threats from China grow.